in the battle-torn streets of Judah Callista, whose citadel had long lost its status as a beacon of galactic civilization, now in ruins after being ravaged by the wars of the Dark Crusade. Figures clad in hellish armour emerged from the shadows. A plague-corrupted warband of the Havoc Brotherhood have come in secrecy to perform their dark rituals that would open a Chaos Gate and taint the lands to further disrupt the order of their former homeworlds, the Imperium of Man. Among them, a champion of the Plague Disciples stood tall, wielding a great axe, aged with the stains of its countless victims' flesh and blood, yet undulled and ever deadly. He silently surveyed the area with his followers around him, and after a while he lifted his hand as a sign for them to disperse. He had sensed his opposition approaching. A hit team of elves had come to stop the ritual. This is a battle report for a game of OnePageRules Grimdark Future Firefight version 3.3.1. We play a special game as a part of a campaign event with some tweaks on the basic rules. It is played using 300-point lists adhering to force organization. I play the High Elf fleets while my opponent plays the Plague Disciples. Here is my list. I have 2 Retributors, both with twin shard carbines, giving each of them 4 rending shots a turn. I have a Scorcher with a short-range fusion rifle that deals deadly 3 damage with AP 4. A Shifter will be placed in reserve to ambush turn 2 onwards. It is equipped with Heavy Web Spinner that dishes out 4 shots with AP 4. Finally, my Striker Elemental will be the melee tank equipped with Combat Shield and the Killing Axe with AP 2 Deadly 3. For my opponent's list, the Plague Disciples will be led by a Plague Champion. It has the Energy Axe to deal deadly damage in melee, and is also equipped with a Plague Sprayer that shoots a Blast 3 round on a 2+ due to it being reliable. It is also Caster 2, so it will have the ability to cast spells. Following it are 2 Plague Bros, both equipped with Shred Rifles that give them 2 rending shots. A Plague Support is equipped with a Plague Sprayer and can deal additional hits on 6s, as it is relentless. Finally, a Plague Destroyer with dual energy claws will be placed in reserve to appear on the battlefield from turn 2 onwards. For this game, we play a special rule with an objective placed on the centre of the field. This objective can only be captured in the last turn, but it counts as having 2 objective points. 3 more objectives are placed on the field. The players alternate in placing them. These objectives are claimed or contested each turn as per the basic rules. However, for all objectives, it is the combined number of starting runes of each models on the objective that decides which side takes it. After placing the rest of the objectives, the Plague Disciples win the roll-off for board edge selection and initiative. Both sides declare units that are in ambush, the Shifter for the High Elves and the Plague Destroyer for the Plague Disciples. The Plague Disciples deploy first, starting with a Plague Brother on the left edge. The Elven Elemental is placed on the centre left. The second Havoc Brother is placed on the other side of the corner ruin. The Scorcher is placed just behind Objective 3. The Plague Champion is placed to the right of the second Plague Brother. An Elven Retributor is placed near the centre. The Plague Support is placed next to the first Plague Brother. And finally, the second Retributor is placed next to the first. Both sides simply advance their units. The Plague Support moves on to Objective 2, while the Elven Scorcher moves on to Objective 3. Both models place themselves behind line-of-sight blocking walls. The Plague Champion and its nearby Plague Brother spread out, facing the centre objective. One of the Retributor advances forward and places a foot on it, while the other stays back a little. The two Retributors and the Elemental form a triangle surrounding the building, so that it secures an area of denial for the shifter to appear behind the walls next turn, and teleport right through it. At the end of the turn, both sides take control of an objective each. Both sides declare ambush. The Havoc Destroyer appears between the Plague Champion and the Retributor on Objective 1. The Elven Shifter phases in behind cover of the wall of the center building ruins. The Plague Champion runs forward between Objectives 1 and 2, equidistantly between the Plague Sprayer, Destroyer and one of the brothers. It then casts Putrefaction with 3 spell tokens and succeeds. The melee weapons of the Havoc Quartet are buffed with the evil powers of Decay and gains +1 AP on their next melee attacks. The Champion then attempts to cast Blessed Virus with the remaining spell tokens, but fails. The Retributor placed forward senses the dangerous dark aura of the foes before it. It decides to fall back, a little to the right, out of the Destroyer's charge range. While doing so, it fires its carbines at the Destroyer, hailing monomolecular shard rounds upon the hulk of rot. The shooting proves to be effective and takes 2 wounds off the Destroyer. As it is tough 3, it still has a single wound before it needs to roll for wound effect. The Plague Brother on the left side comes out of cover of the building and takes aim at the Elemental with its tread rifle. The jagged rifle rounds hit its target, but the magic-imbued ceramic exoskeleton of the Elven construct repels the projectiles. The second Retributor breaks cover to reinforce its kin. It also shoots the Destroyer and deals an extra wound. The Destroyer is forced to take a wound effect roll. It manages to stay alive but is shaken. Determined to stay its ground, the faulted Destroyer rises once more, unwavering itself.
I'll be back.
Meanwhile, the Elven Elemental runs at the Plague Champion and swings its ancient axe. Taken by surprise, the Champion raises its gun-attached gauntlet. The Elven axe cleaves the Plague Sprayer and eats into the gauntlet itself. However, the wretched metal glove manages to dampen the blow enough, such that the keen blade stops about an inch into the plague-bloated forearm of the Champion. The Champion yanks its arm, pulling the axe away from the grip of its assailant. It then swings its own axe imbued with putrid blessings, but the Elemental dodges the blows nimbly and steps away to keep distance from the threat of the enemy. The Plague Brother behind the Destroyer hurries forward to provide it cover fire. It shoots at one of the Retributors, but the rifle rounds glance off the relatively light Elven armor. The Elven Shifter teleports into the firefight and discharges its heavy web spinner at the heavily wounded Destroyer. The cloud of monofilament wires make easy work of dicing up the Destroyer, whose model is removed from the field. The Plague Support steps forward to aid its Champion and fires its Plague Sprayer at the Elven Elemental. However, the hazardous gush does little to corrode the Elemental's body. The Plague Supporter then receives a beam of fusion fire that all but melts it away as a Scorcher enters the fray. The Plague Supporter takes 3 wounds from the fusion rifle, but manages to save one with a roll of 6 on a putrid save. At the end of the turn, neither side captures any more objectives, but the Plague Brothers have taken its first casualty, the Destroyer is taken out, and the Plague Support is shaken. The Plague Champion rushes away from the Elemental and runs towards a less formidable opponent in the Scorcher. It attempts to cast Curse, but in its haste the spellcasting fumbles. The Champion continues its charge against the Scorcher, dragging the blade of its axe against the ground that generates sparks that trail with it. The axe is swung upwards. The Scorcher holds out its rifle to shield itself, but it proves to be a futile effort as it is cleaved cleanly in 2, and the Scorcher itself is felled from the waist up. Such is the might of the blow that it even sends the Scorcher up in the air before the defeated elf lands on its back on the ground. As the Plague Champion turns around to seek its next target, something unexpected happens. The Champion feels a tug and finds the Scorcher on the ground holding onto its cape with its last strength. It had taken 3 wounds, but rolling a 2 on the wound effect roll, it had just managed to survive. Meanwhile, the striker elemental picks up its axe and charges ahead at the plague support, who is on the ground wounded. However, the shaken plague disciple manages to roll around to dodge the elemental's axe. The plague brother, who is behind the fallen destroyer, charges at the elven shifter and engages into melee. It beats the living daylights out of the shifter with its rifle butt that was previously blessed with an extra AP. It deals 1 wound, and with an unfortunate roll of a 5 on the wound effect roll, the shifter is shifted out of the battle. One of the retributors run at the plague brother to avenge the fallen shifter. At point blank range, it discharges its twin shard carbines. It hits 3 times, but unfortunately without rolling any 6s, the rounds gain no AP and they all bounce off the tough armor of the enemy. The other plague brother moves up behind its leader and finishes off the Scorcher mercilessly with its shred rifle. The second retributor joins in to take down the plague brother. It manages to hit with all 4 shots and wound once. The plague brother manages to survive but is shaken. The plague support spends an activation to unwaver itself and is no longer shaken. At the end of the turn, the plague disciples capture objective 4. The elves lose their hard hitters, both the Scorcher and the Shifter, while the plague disciples get away, not losing any more models this turn. One of the retributors move onto objective 4, but turns around to shoot at the shaken plague brother on objective 1. It deals another wound with its twin shard rifles. As it was already wounded, it requires 3 or below on the wound effect roll to survive, but it rolls a 4 and dies. The other plague brother rushes forward to capture objective 3. The second retributor stays on objective 1, but moves in position to take out the shaken plague support. It causes 1 wound, and just like the fallen plague brother, the plague support rolls a 4 on the wound effect roll and is taken out. The plague champion casts muscular atrophy, targeting its closest retributor. With the blast effect roll, its effect spreads onto the elemental as well. However, both targets manage to pass their defense roll and are unscathed. The champion runs at the other retributor, who inadvertently moved into its charge range. The swing from the champion's axe cleaves the retributor's head cleanly, like a Damascus blade cutting through tofu. The elemental turns around and pursues the champion. This time, the champion turns around to block the attack with his own axe. The handles of both axes clash, but the momentum of the elemental's swing overpowers the resistance, and its blade digs deep into the shoulder of the plague champion. The elemental deals 3 wounds, but the putrid roll manages to save 1 of the wounds, so the plague champion takes 2 wounds in total, and it still has 1 wound left before it needs to roll for wound effect. At the end of the turn, all units on both sides take morale tests, as they are below half strength in terms of model count. The plague brother passes. The retributor passes. The plague champion rolls a 1 and fails. The elves gain a huge opportunity to win, as the center objective counts as 2 in this game. However, the elemental also rolls a 1, followed by another 1 on the fearless reroll, and also fails a morale test. As a result, the plague disciples have a hold over objectives 2 and 3, and the high elves control just objective 4, so the plague disciples win 2-1. Let it be remembered that in a game of dice, fearless isn't a guarantee of passing morale tests. My single biggest mistake has to be allowing the plague champion to charge my retributor on the center objective. At the start of its activation, it was out of charge range, but when it moved to shoot the plague support, I didn't make sure it didn't close that gap. But that was a great game. At the end of turn 2, I thought the elves were going to win, yet the plague boys have managed to turn it around on turn 3, and it came down to the morale tests at the end of turn 4. With 3 consecutive dice rolls of 1, there's nothing to do at that point but laugh.